Hey babe, are you okay? Oh, yeah, I've noticed that you've had trouble falling asleep lately. I think I just found something that might help you get into the land of sweet dreams a little easier. You know how you said you like listening to my voice, even if I talk about things you don't really understand? So I recently came across this very interesting aircraft accident report. No one died, don't worry. And I thought that I could read it to you to help you fall asleep. What do you think, darling? Great. Well, then let's try this out. You can snuggle up to me, lay your head on my chest, however you are comfortable. Remember that this is all about you falling asleep, so no need to try to stay awake to get all the information, okay? Great. Then, where did I save it again? Here it is. Close your eyes and then just listen to my voice. Accidents Investigation Branch. Aircraft Accident Report number 6/85, in brackets EW/E24. Registered owner, the de Havilland Aircraft of Canada Limited. Operator, the de Havilland Aircraft of Canada Limited. Aircraft type, de Havilland Buffalo. Model, DHC-5D. Nationality, Canadian. Registration, C-GCTC. Place of accident, runway 25 at the Royal Aircraft Establishment, Farnborough, Hampshire. Latitude, 51 degrees, 16 minutes and 68 seconds north. Longitude, 0 degrees, 46 minutes and 26 seconds west. Date and time, 4th of September 1984 at 1518 hours. All times in this report are GMT. Synopsis. The accident was notified to the Accidents Investigation Branch at 1520 hours on the 4th of September 1984, and the investigation commenced immediately. Assistance was provided by the accredited representative of Canada and his advisors, as well as by the Ministry of Defense and the other parties concerned. The aircraft was carrying out a flying display during the 1984 Farnborough Air Show, the completion of which was to have been a demonstration of the aircraft's short landing capability. As the aircraft was turning on a right-hand final approach for runway 25, the rate of descent was observed to increase rapidly. The final flare was initiated at a very low altitude, and the aircraft made an extremely heavy landing. On touchdown, the nose landing gear collapsed. Both wings failed and the propellers, on contact with the runway, disintegrated. The resulting debris, flung over a wide area, caused damage to 3 aircraft in a static display park and to 4 private motor vehicles. A flash fire, which started as the aircraft touched down, died out before the aircraft came to rest. The aircraft's 3 occupants escaped without injury. However, 1 spectator was slightly injured by flying debris. The report concludes that the accident resulted from an error of judgment by the aircraft commander, unfavorable weather conditions, a transitory handling problem whilst flying outside the tested flight regime, and the pressure on the commander to complete his flying sequence were probably contributing factors. Chapter 1. Factual Information. 1.1. History of the flight. The aircraft was carrying out a flying display during the 1984 Society of British Aerospace Companies (SBAC) Farnborough International Air Display. At 1000 hours on 4th of September 1984, the commander and co-pilot of the de Havilland Aircraft of Canada Limited (DHC) Buffalo Aircraft C-GCTC attended the mandatory briefing for all pilots participating in the air display. During this briefing, the afternoon weather forecast was issued, the most significant factor being the surface wind. which was from the northwest. Veering northerly, mean speeds 15 knots with gusts to 28 knots. It was announced that runway 25 was in use. Pilots were reminded that aircraft should not be flown south of the runway 25 centerline, and that the on-crowd northerly wind might cause some problems in this respect. The flying display commenced at 1300 hours and initially proceeded without incident. Other pilots taking part in the display later reported that although the surface wind conditions caused some problems in achieving an accurate and polished display, they were not hazardous or unduly difficult. One pilot admitted crossing slightly south of the runway centerline, and 2 pilots reported experiencing a noticeable tailwind component on the final approach, which caused them to overshoot their aiming point, the runway threshold, and land further down the runway than they had intended. There were no reports of significant low-level turbulence or wind shear. The display by the Buffalo aircraft was basically a demonstration of the short takeoff and landing (STOL) characteristics of the aircraft. The planned sequence consisted of a short takeoff, a fast fly past, and finally a short tactical landing. Immediately prior to the flight, the commander and co-pilot discussed the sequence, including the adjustments to be made to allow for the surface wind conditions. The only other person on board was a lawyer acting for the aircraft manufacturer who was sitting in the jump seat between the 2 pilots. The aircraft received engine start clearance from Farnborough Air Traffic Control (ATC) at 1503 hours. The startup was reported as normal and the full checklist procedures, including the once-a-day check of spoilers, propeller feathering and reverse, propeller overspeed and stall warning, were completed. The flying controls were checked for full and free movement by the co-pilot immediately before takeoff, for which ATC clearance was given at 1514 hours. Video photography with a clock overlay shows that the brakes were released at 1516.03 hours and that the Buffalo commenced its takeoff run as the 3rd aircraft in the DHC combine, behind the Dash 7 and the Dash 8 aircraft. Immediately after takeoff, the Buffalo carried out a steep climb to a height of 1,000 feet above ground level (AGL), during which the landing gear was retracted and the wing flaps raised to the 10 degrees position. There followed a descending turn to the right, during which the flaps were raised to 0 degrees and propeller speed (NP) reduced to 75%. The aircraft next carried out a low-level flypast along the display line, but in reverse direction, at a height of 250 feet AGL and an airspeed of 250 knots. The commander reports that he extended the flypast in order to allow for the possible adverse effects of cross and tailwind components during the final approach. The aircraft then entered a climbing turn to the left through about 270 degrees before reversing bank in order to position for a right-hand final approach for a STOL landing back onto runway 25 (Appendix 1). During the first turn, as the airspeed reduced below 135 knots, landing gear down and land flap (40 degrees) were selected simultaneously by, respectively, the commander and the co-pilot. The co-pilot also selected the propellers to increase, then commenced lowering the ramp and opening the rear cargo door. At about the same time, 1517 hours, the commander transmitted to ATC that the aircraft was in final approach. ATC replied that the surface wind indicated northerly at 12 knots. Under display procedures, this surface wind report also indicated landing clearance. On the final approach, shortly after the bank had been reversed, and at an estimated height of 450 feet AGL, the nose of the aircraft was observed to drop significantly, resulting in a marked increase in the rate of descent. At this time, the co-pilot recalls that he felt a shudder through the airframe and that he checked the airspeed, which was indicating 85 knots. The steep rate of descent appeared to reduce momentarily before the nose dropped again and the aircraft continued in a steep side-slipping and descending turn to the right, passing slightly south of the runway centerline. At approximately 2 seconds before touchdown, as the aircraft continued its turn back to the centerline, bank angle and rate of descent were observed to reduce. As the aircraft crossed the runway threshold and coincident with the apparent slight reduction in the rate of descent, there was a sudden increase in engine noise as power was applied, but the commander was unable to prevent a very heavy landing. On touchdown, the nose landing gear collapsed, both wings failed, and the propellers, on contact with the runway, disintegrated. The resulting debris, flung over a wide area, caused damage to 3 aircraft in the static display area and to 4 private motor vehicles. A flash fire, which started as the wings failed, died out before the aircraft came to rest. The occupants escaped without injury, but one spectator was slightly injured by flying debris. The accident occurred at 1517.51 hours, after a flight lasting 1 minute and 48 seconds. Following the accident, the commander made 2 statements, which are summarized at subparagraph 1.5.4. 1.2. Injuries to persons. Both crew members and 1 passenger were uninjured, while 1 other person suffered minor injury. Chapter 1.3. Damage to aircraft. The aircraft was damaged beyond economical repair. Chapter 1.4. Other damage. When the aircraft struck the runway, the nose landing gear and the wings collapsed, allowing the propellers to strike the paved surface. The propellers both disintegrated, leaving deep slash marks on the runway surface. Further damage was caused as the aircraft slid to a halt. Debris from the disintegrating propellers damaged 3 aircraft in the static display area and 4 motor vehicles in the public car park. See Appendix 1. 1 propeller blade landed intact on a fairway of an adjacent golf course, 830 meters from the initial impact point, and caused minor damage to the turf. Shortly after the initial impact, the aircraft contacted the arrestor apparatus of the rotary hydraulic arrestor gear, in brackets RHIG, and tore it from its mountings. An area of the runway, 18 meters long and 20 meters wide, had a friction course damaged due to fuel spillage. Chapter 1.5. Personnel information. Chapter 1.5.1. Commander, male, aged 52 years. License, Air Transport Rating, Canada, valid. Aircraft rating, DHC-5 pilot proficiency check completed on 17th of April 1984, valid until 1st of May 1985. Instrument rating, valid until 1st of March 1985. Medical certificate, valid until 18th of May 1985. Category 1 with the restriction that spectacles should be worn. Flying experience, total flying, 10,400 hours. Total in command, 10,100 hours. Total on type, 1,300 hours. Total previous 28 days, 25 hours. Total previous 24 hours, 0.10 minutes. Co-pilot, male, aged 26 years. License, Air Transport Rating, Canada, valid. Aircraft rating, DHC-5 pilot proficiency check completed on 21st of August 1984, valid until 1st of July 1985. Instrument rating, valid until 1st of July 1985. Medical certificate, valid until 1st of July 1985. Category 1, no restrictions. Flying experience. Total flying, 3,600 hours. Total on type, 30 hours. Total previous 28 days, 30 hours. Total previous 24 hours, 0.10 minutes. Prior to leaving Canada, on 28th of August 1984, the commander and co-pilot had carried out 2 flights together as a crew, each of 2 hours, during which they practiced the Farnborough demonstration sequence in conjunction with the DHC-7 and -8 aircraft. The commander was well experienced in demonstrating the Buffalo aircraft and had, amongst many other demonstrations, carried out all the flying in this aircraft at the 1982 Farnborough Air Show. 1.5.4 The commander's statements. In his initial statement, made 2 days after the accident, the commander reported that, after the aircraft entered a steep descending turn on finals, he felt that he was unable to correct the situation, as the aircraft did not appear to be responding to control input demands. He stated that as far as he was aware, the aircraft's stall warning system had not operated and that, although engine power was increased at 400 to 600 feet AGL in order to reduce the rate of descent, it was obvious to him that the situation was irretrievable, and so he did all that he could in order to minimize the impact. In a subsequent statement made some 4 months after the accident and after seeing a videotape recording of it, the commander mentioned that there was a technique used by some Buffalo display pilots of deliberately selecting a reduced blade angle in flight, resulting in a degree of reverse thrust from the propeller in order to adjust the airspeed more quickly towards the target approach speed before starting the final approach. The technique consists of bringing the power levels below a detent so as to select propeller pitch angle into the ground operation and reverse sector of the beta range. As the airspeed nears the target speed, the levers are returned forward of the detent in order to reselect positive thrust. Additional explanation for beta control. Beta control is the system of propeller pitch control which allows the pilot to directly select the propeller pitch in the range between constant speed and maximum reverse. It is described in more detail in paragraph 1.6.7. The commander stated that on the accident flight, the target approach speed had been selected as 85 knots. At an airspeed of about 90 knots and at a height of about 600 feet AGL, he had reselected positive thrust, but shortly afterwards, the aircraft went out of control and started to enter an incipient spin to the right. Appropriate recovery action was taken, including the application of full left rudder and movement of the elevators towards neutral. He further stated that, by this time, the aircraft was heading towards the spectators, and so he reduced the application of left rudder. He considers that he was unable to apply much elevator in order to reduce the rate of descent, since the aircraft was only marginally under control, and that any further application of up elevator only reintroduced the tendency to enter an incipient spin. He further stated that he remembered using considerable forward power selections on both engines at about 400 feet AGL, but this appeared to make the situation worse, and so the power was removed. At this point, he considered that the aircraft was lost and decided to use what little control that he believed he had available in order to minimize the severity of the impending impact. The commander further considered that the reason for the partial loss of control was the reluctance of the right-hand propeller to return to the forward thrust range after reverse thrust had been selected in flight. He recalled that he finally managed to achieve a relatively stable side-slipping descent and that, during the very last part of the approach, the right-hand propeller appeared to return to the positive range. He was thus able to apply forward power and raise the aircraft's nose sufficiently to reduce the high rate of descent before impact. In a later submission, the commander stated, inter alia, that as soon as he saw the runway during the final left-hand climbing turn, he realized that he had underestimated the wind and would have to land long, i.e. a long way down the runway. 1.6 Aircraft Information. 1.6.1 Leading Particulars. Type DHC-5D Buffalo. Constructor's number 103. Date of manufacture May 1980. Certificate of Registration. The registered owners were the de Havilland Aircraft of Canada Limited. Permit to fly. The aircraft held a flight permit issued by the Canadian Air Transport Administration and valid until 23rd of May 1985. A dispensation to demonstrate the aircraft at the Farnborough Air Display was issued by the Civil Aviation Authority CAA on 31st of August 1984. Certificate of Maintenance. A routine 100-hour inspection was carried out on 25th of August 1984 at 884 airframe hours. Daily inspections of serviceability were carried out before all subsequent flights. Total airframe hours 902. Engines 2. General Electric CT 64-820-4. Total engine hours both 902. Propellers 2. Hamilton Standard 63E-60-25-P3. Total propeller hours both 902. Maximum weight authorized for takeoff STOL 41,000 pounds. Actual takeoff weight 29,322 pounds. Maximum authorized weight for landing STOL 39,100 pounds. Estimated landing weight 28,952 pounds. Estimated fuel remaining at time of accident 3,550 pounds. Type of fuel JP-4 AVTAG. Center of gravity ZG. The ZG limits at the actual takeoff weight were between 26.5% and 41.5% mean aerodynamic chord MAC, with the CG at about 35% MAC. The CG remained within the aircraft's weight and center of gravity envelope throughout the flight. 1.6.2 Flight controls. The primary flight controls are operable from either the commander's or co-pilot's position by means of dual control column and rudder pedals. Ailerons and elevators are mechanically operated through control cable systems, and the rudder through a cable-operated hydraulic actuator. An electrically operated aileron trim tab and a mechanically operated elevator trim tab, which is also interconnected with the flap mechanism, provide lateral and longitudinal trim control, while directional trim is provided by biasing the rudder through the rudder actuator. A geared tab on each aileron, a rudder/aileron interconnect tab on the left aileron, and a spring tab on the right elevator give aerodynamic assistance to the primary controls. The wing spoilers, which operate in conjunction with the ailerons in flight and reduce wing lift on landing, are controlled electrically and hydraulically. In normal flight, movement of the control column handwheels greater than about 5 degrees from neutral will cause the spoilers to deploy asymmetrically to assist aileron control. Upon touchdown, the spoilers are disconnected from the aileron circuit and deployed to their full extension symmetrically. This is achieved by selecting landing arm on the spoiler switch. Thereafter, the spoilers deploy automatically on main wheel spin up. It is not possible to deploy the spoilers symmetrically in flight. The wing flaps are of the double-slotted type and consist of root, middle, and outboard foreflaps, and root and middle trailing flaps on each wing. The ailerons are hinged to the outboard foreflaps and move with the flaps, their upward range of movement varying with flap position. A wing flap selector lever is mounted on the overhead console between the pilot's seats and moves within a slot with graduated markings at the normal operating positions of 7, 12, 25, 30, and 40 degrees. 1.6.3 Short field approach and landing. The recommended technique for a short field approach and landing STOL is described in Part 2, Section 2 of the DHC-5D Buffalo Airplane Operating Data. The recommended procedures may be summarized as follows. A. It is recommended that the airplane be established in the landing configuration early for the approach. Select flaps 40 degrees and trim for desired approach speed at or before reaching an altitude of 500 feet. This will leave the pilot free to concentrate on the final approach and landing with no requirement to make selections which could cause trim or airspeed changes. B. The approach speed should be maintained at approach power. The flare should be commenced at speed shown at 50 feet height. For a landing weight of 29,000 pounds, the speed is 64 knots, and power reduced to idle at an altitude from which the rate of descent can be arrested and the airplane rotated to touchdown on the main wheels. An extreme nose-high attitude should be avoided. The following caution and advisory notes are also included. Caution. The high lift flap system produces high lift but also relatively high levels of drag. It is important, therefore, during the final approach, to maintain approach power until the point at which the flare is commenced. If power is prematurely reduced to idle, the high drag of the landing configuration can cause a significant loss of airspeed and an accompanying increase in the rate of sink, making it difficult to achieve an acceptable rate of descent at the completion of the flare. Note: during turbulent conditions, large control movements should be used as required. Airspeed should be increased as appropriate to the conditions of wind and turbulence. The manufacturer has stated that the typical STOL approach involves a glide path angle of 7.5 degrees. 1.6.4 Stall warning system. Incorporated in the flight control system is the stick shaker stall warning system, which vibrates the control column to give the pilot and co-pilot pre-stall warning at approximately 10% above the stalling speed with the flaps and landing gear in all the normally used conditions. The system comprises a left wing lift transducer, a flap position potentiometer, a signal summing unit, 2 stick shakers and a test switch. The wing lift transducer vane responds to movements of the airflow stagnation point as the stall is approached and changes the voltage to the signal summing unit. The summing unit compensates this voltage for flap position, detected by the flap position potentiometer, and operates both stick shakers to vibrate both control columns. There is no audio or visual warning indication. The system is powered from both the DC and AC electrical power supplies and protected by 2 circuit breakers, one relating to each electrical system. Disconnecting either circuit breaker in flight will deactivate the stall warning system. At a landing weight of 29,000 pounds, landing gear extended and flaps 40 degrees, the power off stalling speed is 57 knots. In the same configuration, but with 45 degrees of bank applied, the stalling speed increases to 68 knots. 1.6.5 Short Field Approach Speed Indicator. The aircraft's instrumentation incorporates a short field approach speed indicator, which is operated by the stall warning system. The instrument is calibrated only for the final approach phase of a short field landing with flaps at 40 degrees. The dial is marked slow and fast on the left and right sides of a triangular index mark. The index mark represents the optimum approach speed, and deviations of the indicator pointed to left or right of the mark denote insufficient or excessive speed, respectively. The commander stated that he did not use the indicator during the display flight. 1.6.6 Fuel System. The aircraft fuel system basically comprises inboard and outboard tank groups in each wing. Total usable fuel capacity is 13,697 pounds, with 8,315 pounds in the inboard tank groups and 5,382 pounds in the outboard tank groups. During normal operation, fuel in the inboard tanks is automatically pumped by injector pumps into the outboard tanks. Thus, the outboard tanks remain full until the inboard tanks are empty. Since the estimated fuel remaining at impact was 3,550 pounds, it follows that the inboard tanks were empty of usable fuel at that time. 1.6.7 Engine and propeller control systems. The two power units each comprise an axial flow 3-turbine turbopropeller unit incorporating a 14-stage compressor, an annular combustion chamber, a gas generator mechanically coupled to the compressor rotor, and a 2-stage power turbine which is mechanically coupled to a speed decreaser gear assembly. The propellers are driven off the front of the speed decreaser gearbox, and blade pitch angle is actuated and controlled by a self-contained The propellers are driven off the front of the speed decreaser gearbox, and blade pitch angle is actuated and controlled by a self-contained controller and hydraulic system. A propeller governor built into the controller is operated by a propeller lever, which selects propeller speed, NP, during constant speed operation. The power control levers comprise a power lever, fuel lever, and propeller lever for each engine. Each lever moves in a slot with appropriate markings for lever operation, and all are situated in a central overhead console between the two pilot seats. Each of the two power levers, marked throttle, controls engine speed, NG, during the forward and reverse power ranges, and propeller blade angle through the beta and reverse propeller blade ranges. For normal operation in the forward thrust range, where propeller blade angle is greater than plus 17 degrees, the propeller blade angle is controlled by the propeller governor through the propeller lever, and the power lever controls the engine power output. When the power lever is retarded to idle, with the propeller levers to increase, the propeller governor will reduce blade angle as it attempts to maintain the propeller speed selected by the propeller lever. As the blade angle reduces to plus 17 degrees, which is attained at a point slightly above idle, propeller control reverts directly to power lever control. The power lever then directly schedules a minimum blade angle through a servo control system. This is known as operating in the beta range. The range of blade angles from plus 17 degrees down to plus 7 degrees is known as the approach and landing sector of the beta range. At a propeller blade angle of plus 7 degrees, the power levers contact the flight idle gate and, in order to achieve a further reduction in blade angle, the pilot must twist the power lever hand grips, thus overcoming this gate. Further rearward movement of the propeller lever retracts the mechanical flight low pitch stop in the propeller and then de-energizes secondary low pitch stop. The purpose of the secondary low pitch stop is to prevent the blades from passing appreciably below the mechanical flight low pitch stop in the event of a system malfunction, allowing uncommanded blade angles below plus 7 degrees. A detent is felt by the pilot at the minimum reverse power lever position, and two advisory lights on the coaming illuminate at blade angles below approximately plus 3 degrees. The range of blade angles from plus 7 degrees down to minus 27 degrees, full reverse, is known as the ground operation and reverse sector. There is no safety interlock to prevent deliberate selection of ground operation and reverse pitch in flight, nor is there any warning or prohibition in the aircraft's operating manual against the use of this range in flight. However, the manufacturer states that its use in flight is neither recommended nor taught to pilots, nor have any flight tests of such use been conducted, since it is not required for any certification condition. Data provided by the manufacturers has shown that at an airspeed of 85 knots with full power selected, the propeller blades should adopt a pitch angle of about plus 25 degrees. The time to develop full power from flight idle is about 3 to 3.5 seconds. Rapid forward movement of the power levers with the propeller levers at increase will, in addition to demanding increased engine power, immediately schedule the blades to the plus 17 degrees position, maximum better control blade angle. The propeller model specification indicates that over the range plus 7 degrees to 17 degrees, the blades will move at an average rate of about 12 degrees per second, and therefore take about 0.85 seconds to move from plus 7 degrees to the plus 17 degrees position. The engine should take slightly longer than 1.9 seconds to generate sufficient power to rotate the propeller at 100% NP. The propellers will therefore momentarily dwell at the plus 17 degrees position, and as the engine accelerates towards full power, the blade angles will coarsen in order to maintain 100% NP and prevent an overspeed condition, eventually reaching about plus 25 degrees blade angle. I'd say this is enough for today, as you're already almost asleep. The report will be continued tomorrow, as we'll definitely do this again. It's just working too well. So tune in again tomorrow for the second part of 3. And sleep well.